Hello, everybody. Robbie here. Welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. And in this episode, we're sharing a talk I gave at the Henley Business School Marketing Group for Coaches. In it, I get into my transition from feeling like a newcomer to fully embracing identity as a coach. In the talk and the questions that follow, we get into Ken Wilber and enlightenment. We get into the Prosperous Coach Flywheel. That's the center of this talk. How you can think about the principles from that book as a virtuous cycle that naturally lead to growing a coaching practice. We talk about the importance of creating a body of work and how you can use the 12-minute method to do that without it being time-consuming. We talk about money conversations with integrity, moving from free sessions to paid clients, and loads more. And this was recorded a little while ago. I was reflecting on that before recording this about 2 years ago as we release it. It was recorded as part of my 12-minute method 100 podcasts challenge. We'll put a link to that and everything else we mentioned across the talk in the show notes. And I kind of wish we'd shared it more closer to the time, because as we'll get to, my thinking has moved on in some of these things a little bit, although definitely it's still worth sharing and listening in to this talk to get that deep dive into the Prosperous Coach. But I always remember my own work, right? Being reminded of the 12-minute method through this episode. I'm reminded that there's a great chapter in one of the books on a Chinese proverb. The best time to plant an apple tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So maybe the best time to share this talk was 2 years ago. Second best time is now. And also another chapter in one of the 12-minute books, and we'll put a link to the blog posts of these topics as well, is about the lost relics of our art and how sometimes something feels less important to the artist. So books don't get released, or albums don't get released. Blog posts don't get shared because they were written a little while ago and they feel out of date. But who am I to know how this will be, who and how this will be impactful to? And there's certainly loads in this. I asked permission before we started recording this talk to use it on the podcast. I imagined it would come out a little sooner than this because I knew that deep dive into the Prosperous Coach, into creating clients, into cultivating confidence, how you can use these techniques like the 12-minute method, like the ideas that Lipin and Chandler share in the book, The Prosperous Coach, and bring them to life in this talk. And I knew that by giving it to a live audience, more would be asked of me, and also that the questions would bring things to life. And that's why we get into some great stuff around money, around fees, and around that move from free or gifted sessions to paid sessions and paid clients. So, I'm really looking forward to you listening in. It's also worth saying there are some things I think I had wrong when I gave this talk, and that's a part of sharing our work and moving things on. So, when I was giving this talk, I had made a mistake about the Prosperous Coach Flywheel. So whilst the Prosperous Coach approach does give an amazing flywheel, and listen to the talk to get a sense of what a flywheel is and how it's such a useful tool for you and your clients, I thought that I'd also discovered something else, which was that every successful coach had to do the things on the Prosperous Coach Flywheel to have a sustainable business. And I now disagree with that. I had it proved wrong to me by a client of my own. And there's more about that and the updated thinking, where I think I have identified not only the virtuous flywheel that grows a coaching business sustainably, but also the things that every coach who has a sustainable business absolutely has to do. And that's all in my work around the coaching business flywheel. You can find that at thecoachesjourney.com. We'll put a link in the show notes again, wherever you're listening. And you can get a free ebook, an introduction to the coaching business flywheel, which isn't a bad thing to have up in front of you while I'm talking about this episode. You can get in it, it's got an image of the Prosperous Coach Flywheel, so you can really see what I'm talking about. But you can also hit the coaching business flywheel page to just get a sense of what a flywheel might look like. So make sure to check that out and check out the free ebook. I'm really proud of that work. I think it's a genuine contribution to the field. It builds on what I talk about in this episode that comes from Lipin and Chandler and others, but shows us, I think, something new and something authentic to me. So I'm really glad to be able to share that with you as well. Thanks for those of you who've already downloaded it. There's an amazing digital product that I've created to go with it, which for the right person will be really transformative. It includes lots of template emails that I actually send to clients when we're thinking about the kinds of invitations and connections, and transitioning people from gifted sessions to paid clients. These kind of moves, how I actually do it, what I actually send people. You can now buy those things as well. And that's called the Coaching Business Flywheel Booster Pack, and you can find that at thecoachesjourney.com. But so thanks to everyone who's already downloaded the ebook or bought that booster pack and supported the show over the years. Please do subscribe and rate, follow wherever you are. That helps us keep the episode, keep the work we do free. But a particular big thanks to Joey Owen, Alex Whitten, Ruth Saville, David Norris, Jessica Jam, Lucy Braun, and Linda Ransom for all their ongoing support. I think I got everyone there. Alex, David, Jess, Joey, Linda, Lucy, and Ruth. That is worth saying just before we dive in, that there are a couple of ways if you want to support the show beyond following and subscribing, that you can do that. You can become a supporter of the show. Find out more about that at patreon.com/thecoachesjourney, or you can join my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches, which starts from £20 a month and includes group coaching sessions with other amazing coaches on their journey, and also one-to-one time with me if you join as a full member. And we've got, I think, one space in the full membership at the moment. So you can find out more about that at thecoachesjourney.com/community. We're always getting into the Prosperous Coach Flywheel, how to do the kinds of things that people ask questions about in this talk, and also how to really dive into using those flywheels to leverage them for our business and thrive as people while we're doing all of that. So thanks everyone for their support. But without further ado, dive into this. I hope it gives you the permission to do what I feel like I have managed to do, although it hasn't always been easy, which is bring an approach to my business that's about authenticity and service and personal growth for me and the clients. So enjoy me at the Henley Business School Marketing Group for Coaches.
I guess it's a bit of an extra intro to Robbie before he fires up. I just want to say a massive thank you to Robbie. He's not only a friend of mine, but he's probably the reason I'm a coach, and that means a great deal to me. I was working on something separately, and we sat in a cafe near Waterloo, where I think Robbie's done some of his coaching, coffee in his hand.
One of my old mentors used to coach there a lot. Yeah.
And Robbie just started talking about this coaching thing, and his passion, his energy, his everything came through, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds quite interesting," and that got me on the path, and that led to a 2-day taster session for me that led on to more practice and education. So it's a really nice moment for me personally to reach this, where I can bring Robbie back into my world. And thank you, Robbie.
Yeah, total pleasure, and thanks for having me here. It means a lot. Partly because I think I've only just started feeling like an established coach. Like I noticed earlier this year was the first time I caught myself just introducing myself as a coach in some ways and not saying anything, not feeling any need to say anything about what I'd done before, which I think is like an interesting moment. So thanks all for being here and giving up some of your time this evening if you're in the UK, wherever you are. So I often think about this quote that my dad told me about the philosopher Ken Wilber said. And he said something like, becoming enlightened is a bit like having an accident. You can't make yourself have an accident, and you can't make yourself enlightened, but you can do some things to become accident or enlightenment prone. And the reason I say this now is I think I'm going to try and, in this first part of this call, talk about some of the ways we can make ourselves client prone. I think like creating clients, having a coaching business, you can't make the client say yes. But you can do some things that make you client prone. And we came up with a title for this session about called something I like to set ambitious targets with titles of things like this. The only 5 habits that grow a coaching business. And I should say that I don't know if that's true. So if we can come up with, if I turn out to be wrong, I'm going to talk about that over this call. If I turn out to be wrong, like that'd be great. It'd be great to find out there's a 6th one, or that one of these 5 things that I'm going to talk about isn't important. So let's try and all of us learn some new things and do some thinking together. Just say a little bit more about me and my work. I know Jamie sent around a bit about me. But yeah, I think of myself as a leadership coach. And there are kind of 3 things that I'm interested in my coaching. they're all about leadership in different ways, but one of them is more explicitly about leadership. So I love to do one-on-one work with leaders, often people who are facing complex challenges, people who want to do the right thing in their work and find that hard, whatever that means for them. And the challenge is often, how do we go to a new level of success or a new type of success without having to compromise who we are, which is sometimes the challenge that people kind of feel like they have to do to get to where they want to get to. This is kind of leadership. There's a piece of my work about creativity. I got really interested in why do people sometimes not do the thing they really want to do? So creativity at the kind of its most core, like if I'm going to create something from nothing, if I'm going to write a book, yeah, but if I'm going to start a business or start a new habit, why is there sometimes a gap between the thing we want to do and actually doing the thing? What can we do to help people in that gap? And that's what my 2 books are about. There's one here, actually. I've just noticed it in the picture of myself. It's quite funny why this is here. So my wife actually puts this here because I look after our daughter on Mondays, and so she'll work here then, and also sometimes else in the week. And she'd rather put my book up. Partly it's because it's good to have other people do your marketing for you, right? Partly she wants to put my book up to promote me to her colleagues. Partly it's because she gets embarrassed getting asked questions about this, which is a distinctly Robbie thing, which is not to do with Emma. And so it's for anyone who's interested, it's a handmade model, and not by me, of Dross the Legend, a character from a David Gemmell novel. And one of the many things that I love about that, but actually the fact that I'm talking about it during creativity is interesting, because I love when just ordinary people just reveal these great talents. And this was made by a guy during lockdown who was furloughed, and so started making these models and then posted it on a Facebook group, and there it was. And I think that's super cool. And then the third thing that I'm really interested in my work is coaching. And I'm interested in that because I get really interested in how things work. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about in this call. I'm going to talk for kind of 15 to 25 minutes. I never know quite how long I'll talk for. And then there'll be loads of time for questions. And I should say as well that I'm not going to do a super amount of practical how-to stuff that I've learned or seen people do in the talk, but get to that in the questions if that's what's interesting. So I'm going to try and we can keep that as relevant as possible. So coaching, partly because I'm interested in how things work, and partly because I think it's actually a really important. It's really important that we have a lot of skilled, effective coaches out there in the world, and probably some of that is the enthusiasm Jamie picked up on. Like, I really see coaching as being an important part of the solution to many of the challenges that we have. And so the work that I do around that, I have a community for coaches, supporting coaches to thrive and survive, even sometimes in what can be quite a lonely profession, create thriving businesses, be connected to other coaches. And I have a podcast for coaches as well, which is usually a monthly podcast, often with me interviewing a coach about their journey. And it's called The Coach's Journey. I didn't deliberately do that there, but it is called The Coach's Journey. And you can find it in all the podcast places and at thecoachesjourney.com. And my coaching has taken me, I've done lots of work with people who you've never heard of, doing what I think are cool things in different corners of the world. But it's also taken me to some really exciting places, to Swiss Re and Moonpig and University of Edinburgh and King's College London and DFID and Frieze Art Fair and Coventry City of Culture and all kinds of interesting places. And as someone who's really curious about the world, and that's a really exciting part of coaching for me. So I've been coaching for 7 years. In fact, almost exactly 7 years. 7 years next week since someone first paid me for coaching. And I've been coaching full time for about 5 years. And I work mostly in the charity sector before that. So one of the things I can say with total truth, which is easier to say if you've worked in the charity sector than if you've had a high-flying corporate career, is I make more money as a coach than I ever made in my career before that, which is a nice thing to be able to say. And it's important because that was an important part of changing career for me, of moving into coaching. I wanted more earning potential. It was a small part of it, but it was an important part. And when I think about the things which enabled me to get to that place after a couple of years of starting the training of coaching being my job, and what's enabled me to be successful since then, a lot of it comes down to reading this book at the right time. And this is The Prosperous Coach by Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin. And Jamie said that no one had really talked about that on one of these calls, which is great for me because it means I get to bask in Steve and Rich's glory. And has anyone read it, of the people I can see? Has anyone come across this book? Yeah, Susan has, great, and Xenia, yeah, great. Well, I don't know if it was true for the two of you. Oh, and Fiona, great, yeah. I don't know if it's true for the three of you, but for me, like for a lot of coaches, reading this book was a really important part of thinking about this business. For new coaches, you know, when I've spoken to coaches, a lot of them have that story of, oh, this book made a difference. And I'll talk a bit about that and why that is in the next few minutes. What was interesting, I was talking to one of my longtime mentors, who's a coach called Katie Harvey, and she's coached something like, I mean, it was 16,000 hours of coaching about 3 years ago. So who knows how many she's on to now. And she's a spectacular supervisor and coached me through some very important and difficult parts of my life. So she means a lot to me. But she said that when she read that book, she'd been coaching for quite a while at that point. What was great is that she read it and was like worried, you know, that she would find she'd been doing it wrong the whole time, because everyone was so excited about that book when it came out in 2013, 2014. And she found out that she'd been doing that. It was what she'd been doing the whole time. And the reason that's important is that I think that the book does have in it some ideas which are fundamental to building a coaching business. And that by identifying what they are, that makes life a lot easier for us, because instead of having us putting energy in, we can concentrate our energy in the things that make a difference if we want to grow a coaching business. And I think like one of the things that's been present in my life, so like it is a real desire to work out how and why things work. And I know that I think a lot of people and a lot of coaches have that to a certain extent, but for me, it was really important. Like I showed up in all kinds of places in my life. You know, one was that a strange part of my story is because my parents were kind of slightly hippie anarchist types. I was home educated until I was 9. Which was like, I wouldn't change it for the world, and which made one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, which was then to go into the school system aged 8 or 9 with a whole set of rules that I didn't understand and found very difficult. And I think a lot of both my struggles and my strengths were born in those couple of years of adapting. But one of the ways that I dealt with not having an absolute clue how to deal with school or really with the social sides of it was to sit back, withdraw, and really try and work out what was going on. And then that interest in working out what was going on carried on into all the games I played at different stages in my life, including geeky fantasy games, of course. And I studied maths. I studied a lot of maths. Another kind of weird part of my story, given where I've ended up, is that I have a BSc in mathematics. And one of the things you do a lot in maths is you work out what's going on, and you think, like, what's the way that I need to approach this? And so I used the Prosperous Coach and the things that are in it. And I'm not going to talk about everything that's in it. You can go away and read it. It's a very expensive book now. It's like $50 is what it says on the back of this one. I bought this one more recently. I had a Kindle version from back in the day when it only cost like 10 quid or something. But as a coach, I think I often say, like, it's probably the best $50 you could spend as an investment in growing your business. It's not a long book to read. It's a book of principles. And so there are lots of ones that are in there that are important. One was the thing that I kind of said. It's like, it's a call to arms to do the things that count, not the things that you do to avoid doing the things that count. And that means a lot of it is, like, one of the things that says, drop all the marketing you're doing. You know, which is an interesting thing to think about on a call like this. But it's like, drop all the marketing you're doing and do the things that actually matter. Another way is to focus completely on service. Built in there is the idea that you can build a coaching business, a prosperous coaching business, on invitation and referral only, on word of mouth. That's one of the things that Katie spotted when she read it. It was like, I've been just serving people. But she still doesn't have a website. She's never had a website. I've known her for 8 years, and her website has said coming soon that whole time. And yet her coaching business is full. And that's because she built it on service and invitation and referral. That's why when she read the book, she was like, phew, I've been doing it. It's also about doing deep work on ourselves and with our clients. There's lots and lots in there. But one of the key bits in it is that they talk about, one of the bits where they say drop the marketing stuff, is to focus on a 4-stage process. I'll talk more about these in a sec, but basically the idea being, in fact, I will talk about them more in a sec, a 4-stage process for creating clients. The idea being that we can create again, I still think that language is not quite right. We can create the conditions to create clients. We can never really create the clients. All we can do is get them there and then make ourselves prone to actually them becoming a client. We can, take the horse to water, but not make them drink, but you can like nudge their head down a bit so that they make the water look really appetizing. And then part of the reason I'm talking about working out why things work is I got excited a couple of years ago when I heard Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, on the Tim Ferriss show. And I don't know if he was the first person to talk about it. He was talking on that show about the idea of a flywheel. Has anyone come across a flywheel before? I'd never really heard of them. And then I was talking to my brother-in-law who works at Spotify, and he said, oh, we use flywheels all the time. And basically, the idea is that in a business, if you can kind of find the things that, I'm sure Jim Collins would say it in a more articulate way. You find the things that if you do them, you almost can't help but end up growing your business, i.e. there's kind of a cycle, which means that your business grows. If you can find those things, identify them, and then kind of, I think this is my language, oil that flywheel in the right way, then your business will grow as long as you're doing those things and oiling the flywheel. And the example that he gives, that I looked it up to check it, but in that interview is an Amazon example. And if you imagine this, if Amazon have low prices, they almost can't, on a wide range of products, they almost can't help but have people showing up on the website to buy things and building the customer base. If they build the customer base, they almost can't help but have more third-party sellers on the site. And if they have more third-party sellers on the site, they almost can't help but have a growing infrastructure and, higher revenue to fixed costs. And if they have higher revenue to fixed costs, they almost can't help but have more lower priced products. And so then the whole thing links up and you've got this flywheel. And if you can just help the revenue over fixed costs get a bit better, or find little ways to get more third-party sellers on, then the whole thing is a virtuous cycle of the business growing. And I got excited when I heard that, because I got this sense that the reason that the Prosperous Coach client creation framework is so interesting is because it's essentially a flywheel. And if we can do that, then that gets exciting, because we know what the stages are, and we can oil those stages and get better at each one, so that our client base grows and our coaching business grows. And if you want to have an impact through your work, then as a coach, then the most important thing is that you're doing the work with clients. And if you want to use all the skills that you've developed and all those kind of things, then that's a really important part of this. So, never seen before. Here is the Prosperous Coach flywheel. Let me just hide it so that we're not seeing it all at once. So here is, let me get you so I can see you all. Here is the Prosperous Coach flywheel. So for the first parts of it are the 4 stages from Rich and Steve's book. And this is essentially, the first one is connect. So if you connect with enough people, and this is not just connecting with people on LinkedIn, this is having an actual, a real true connection with somebody. If, it might be like you talk about your work with them, or you really understand, you really meet somebody and they know you and they know a bit about what you do. If you connect with enough people, you almost can't help but end up inviting some of them to have coaching conversations with you. This is a key Prosperous Coach approach distinction that one of the things you might do, and we can talk about how you might do that, is invite people into a coaching conversation with you. That might be a move at your disposal. And for me, seeing how that was a move at my disposal really made creating coaching business feel like something that was within my control. So if you connect with enough people, you almost can't help but end up, if you talk about your work, inviting some of them to do some coaching with you, if inviting people into coaching is something that you do. If you invite enough people into coaching conversations, you almost can't help but create powerful coaching experiences with people. Again, here's a Prosperous Coach distinction, that one of the things they really talk about in that book is moving from a model where we might do a chemistry call, we might do an enrollment call or a consultation, to just giving someone an experience of what it's like to work with you. And what I think I've seen, but this might be one that I'm wrong about, is that when really successful coaches, Katie is a good example, Phil, who used to meet in Pan Quotidian, which is probably why we met there, they both wouldn't say they were gifting a coaching experience to people at that stage, but they were really. Like when I did my consultation with Katie, she did exactly what she does in a coaching session with me, and I got the feel of what that was like. And I have found this, for a reason I'll talk about in a minute, to be a way of working that I really like. So if you connect with enough people, you almost can't help but invite some of them into a coaching conversation, and you almost can't help but then create powerful coaching experiences with some of them. And then if you do that enough, you almost can't help but end up saying to some of those people, here's how I would propose we work together. And it would cost X pounds to work with me for Y months. And if you make enough proposals, you almost can't help but have clients to coach. And if you coach people, you almost can't help but have them connect you to new people, refer people to you, and then you're back in the cycle. Now, just a little thing to add in. The reason that I shifted completely, I was doing consultations like I was kind of taught in my coaching training, where we just talked about coaching objectives. The reason I switched to making it, I'm going to coach you, the prosperous coach way, is because of this line. Because what happens then is, if you coach everybody that is a prospective coaching client, then everybody who is a prospective coaching client for you is somebody who then might refer new people to you. So you build your experience base of coaching people, but also you build up that extra part of the flywheel. Whereas otherwise, if like when I was doing consultation, it just felt like if that was a no, if I got a no after the proposal, then that kind of relationship was kind of a bit stalled and wasn't necessarily a part of my business ecosystem. Now, there are lots of ways, and we can talk about them. Jamie, if you want to, we can go into any of these and we can talk about like how you might, or if anyone wants to ask about any of them, how I do it, how I've seen other people do it. And I feel like I've got like nearly 40 episodes of my podcast. I feel like I haven't seen anyone growing a coaching business that hasn't had all this in it, that hasn't been doing these things. And these to me feel like, I think these really the 4 things: being, connect, invite, create, propose. Those are the things out of the Prosperous Coach book. They feel like non-negotiable habits if you want to grow a coaching business. Like if you want to have coaching clients, you have to be saying at some point, it costs X pounds to work with me. Somebody does. I mean, if you're doing associate work, it may not always be you, but you have to at least be saying to the company, essentially it's a proposal when you say to a company, if they say, come work for us and coach people. So I coach for Better Up, who are, these days they can say they are the world's largest coaching and mental health company, I think. I coach for them, They offered me to become a coach with them after some selection process. I had to say to them, yes, I will do this work for you. That is essentially a proposal. So no coaching clients exist without some conversation about money if they're a paid client. Similarly, I don't think anybody becomes a coaching client. Like if you don't connect with anyone, you can't really have coaching clients. Sometimes, of course, more than one of these things happen at once, and we can talk about that. But we can double click on any of these things if we want to, and how we can kind of improve them and oil those bits of the flywheel. But I have seen, and I've heard, I did kind of 8-9 months of work with Rich Lippin, who's one of the authors of The Prosperous Coach, and I've heard him talk about it as well. I've particularly in my life seen a thing which is particularly useful for oiling the flywheel. So for making all of these stages easier. And that is to create a body of work. Now, I think that this is a negotiable one. Katie, for example, is a good example. She does not have any body of work. In fact, I had her on my podcast. She's episode 1. And I think that's the most marketing she's done in probably 10 years. And it's actually, she's full now. She's too busy. And I blame myself for putting her as episode 1 so that people became her clients and not mine. But it's like, she doesn't have a body of work. You can get away without it. You don't need it, but it can be really useful. And the reasons it can be useful, well, essentially the main reason it can be really useful is it's essentially a way for people to get to know you before they meet you. It's a way to connect with people. It helps with that. It really helps when you're in the invite, create, propose stage. Because if people kind of know you already by the time that they get into the enrollment conversation, whatever that looks like, the client creation conversation, part of your job is already done, right? Because if they really know you from your body of work, they're not going to have the problem we sometimes have when we meet a new client, that actually the alignment isn't there. They're the wrong person for me to coach. That sometimes happens. But it happens a lot less because I have a big body of work now. So by the time people get to me, they've probably read something I've written. They might have listened to some podcasts if they're a coach. I don't do much. I have one one-on-one coach client who's a coach at a time. Most of that happens in the in the community that goes with the coach's journey. But like, they might have listened to some podcasts, they might have heard me on Priya's show after we do that, for example. And people are kind of in that space where they really know you. Now, that's only true if the work you're creating is authentic work, is in alignment with who you are. Because what we don't want with a body of work, this is a really interesting thing, what people don't like is incoherence. That lowers trust, in my experience and view. If you feel like someone's going to be like something, then you meet them, for example, in a enrollment conversation in a coaching business, and they're not like that. There's some dissonance there, and that is going to undermine trust. However, if when you show up, they're exactly how they sounded when you heard them on a podcast, they're exactly how it sounded in the article they wrote, then that's a different thing altogether. And just to say really briefly, it's kind of on the book behind me, but one of the things that I care a lot about at the moment is about helping people create their bodies of work. And to very shortly say just the last thing I'll say, and then we can do some questions and get into anything else that people want to do, get into. But like, it's really important for me to kind of tell a little bit of the story of that creating a body of work doesn't have to take a long time. So the story of my books is that I was kind of anxious and didn't want to, I knew I wanted to write. I was in that gap between the thing I wanted to do and the things I was doing, but I wasn't doing it. And when I was doing it, it was really hard. So my coach at the time, this guy called Joel Monk, we created a writing practice where I would write on my train, and the train lasted about 12 minutes. Write while the train's moving, stop when it stops, proofread it once, and post it online. And I started doing that in August 2016. I then made it into a weekly practice, and I've been doing it ever since, which means that I've got 252 articles, something like that, taking holidays into account, all written in 12 minutes. And then I realized the remarkable thing was that the first 3 years of those were basically a series of books about how you get from I want to do this, but I'm not doing it, to I'm doing it. I could tell that story more at length another time, but I just wanted to say something about that creating a body of work doesn't have to take all the time in the world. And actually, maybe the last thing to say is, creating that body of work has been really transformational for me as a human. And that one of the things about these practices, particularly if we take coaching clients out of this for a sec, because in some ways that's what we're here to, what's what I'm talking about, is that being the end point. All these other things, for me, they've all been practices that I'm really glad I've got much more competent at. Like it's very good for me as a human to be better at connecting with people and talking about my work. It's very good for me as a human to be able to invite people, ask people, offer people things. It's really good for me as a human to be able to do great coaching and have those connections to people. And for me, it's been a really important area of growth to be able to get comfortable talking about money and how I work. And creating a body of work has changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. So there we have the debut, as far as I know, maybe I'll send it to Rich, of the Prosperous Coach Flywheel. And that's quite a bit from me. And like I said, Jamie, I don't know how long these things take when I do these talks these days. And what are we at? We're probably are at about 25 minutes, the upper end. But there we go.
Thanks, Robbie. It was brilliant. Thank you so much. And we'll open up to questions from the audience. I've got plenty I can go with, but we can catch up another time, Robbie. Anyone else in the group that would like to put a question to Robbie, please? Go Susan with the physical hand up before Xenia on the virtual. Susan.
Thanks, Robbie. That's interesting. And I was introduced to the Prosperous Coach quite early on when I started sort of out on my practice, as it were, on my own. And for me, and you mentioned it right at the very end, for me, it's always been this issue of talking about money. Mm. And I don't know whether it's because these guys are from the US, aren't they?
Rich is a British guy. He's from like Essex or somewhere, I think, but he has lived in America for quite a long time. Yeah.
I don't know whether it's a very British thing or what, or whether it's a combination of being British and being coaches.
Yeah.
It's the thing I hear the most. And I, at the beginning, was uncomfortable about is how you ask for money, how you have a money conversation, and how you can't just leave it to an assumption that they'll work out how much it costs. And the thing I learned from this book and from some courses that I did related to this, because there's many spin-off courses from this book, was, don't talk about price. I mean, obviously you tell them how much the session will be, but talk about what value that represents for them. And that's what I eventually came comfortable with is making somebody understand, if they blanch at, however many hundred or thousands of pounds, is, how much is it worth to you to solve this problem, this issue, what it is that is blocking your life and so on. And when you put it in the context of what value it gives to your life to sort this out or to be moved forward or, become a successful leader, actually the money suddenly, when you think, well, I'd probably spend that on going on holiday, you have to kind of put it into context for people. And I just wondered how, whether you ever had money conversation blocks, and that's the trick I learned, was to put it into context for people rather than just focusing on the absolute amount of money. But I just wondered if you had any tips on how to have money conversations.
Yeah, I mean, just let's really be really clear. Yes, loads. I had loads. And I don't know, like I would have put it down to, charity sector, only ever been salaried, grew up in a family without much money. You could put it onto all kinds of stories, doesn't really matter. But yes, loads and loads. And the first thing so I think there's loads in what you've said, Susan, for other people. You said loads already. A couple of things that come up for me. So one is I kind of somehow, I don't know how, I kind of knew this would be a thing for me. So I started practicing it as soon as I could. My coach training, they were like, yeah, start charging straight away. Different coach trainings say different things, but that was really useful for me. So I started at like £30 a session. And it felt like an extraordinary amount of money. And 7 years ago, next week, someone said yes. And I couldn't believe it. Right. But essentially practice is what's changed for me. Like keeping practicing it and being willing to lean into the discomfort around, if you think about fees and them going up, being willing to lean into the discomfort about the next fee. Mm-hmm. Things that helped me with that were doing the sums. So like a really important moment for me was when I was like, well, if I want to be making, I can't remember what it was, £20,000 from coaching part-time in these number of years, what does that mean in terms of how much people will have to be paying me and how many times I'll have to sell coaching every year? So that made a difference. It's like, well, if I've got to get, I can't remember what it was, I've got to get to that 20 grand and I want to have 12 clients, I can't read the sums in my head, I'll have to be charging this much. And so I'll need to get there. And so I can't mess around charging 30 quid the whole time. So that was one. And Phil, who I mentioned before, Phil Bolton, there's an interview with him on my podcast as well. He once told me about a rule of like every 6 times, raise your prices, something like that. It's a good kind of rule because it's just about, we probably don't have a very good sense of value. Some of us, those of us like me, and it sounds like you, Susan, who have some of those things, probably don't have a good sense of our value. We're probably undervaluing ourselves and worrying that we're charging too much, and that might not be true. So have some games that you play with yourself to get your prices up. 2 other things. One is challenges, a bit like the podcast challenge. Like to break through a lot of this, I did it was a different coach that set it, but it was an idea that Rich Litvin uses a lot, what called a 90-day money game. So I do this kind of thing sometimes with people who want to on the Coach's Journey community as well. It's fun. You can just do it. The game is think about how much money you'd like to make in the next 90 days, times it by 4, because that's a good ratio of how much of no's to yeses, 3 to 1, something like that. And then try and make that amount of proposals. And when I did that, it's like, well, if you're going to try and get to 80 grand of proposals in the next 90 days, again, I can't mess around with any £500 ones, but I'm playing a game there rather than my whole value and business and mortgage rests on the yes or the no. And the last one is that I would say is, as well as showing them it's back to the thing of creating the powerful experience. So where I've got to now, which is a really lovely place to be, and some of this is about the success of about my business doing what I need it to do financially. Just really like Elizabeth Gilbert would say, day jobs get a bad rap because if you put all the pressure of paying your mortgage and get your kids food on your calling, That's a lot of pressure to put on something precious that you love. So Rich would say, if you need a client to pay your rent, you don't need a client, you need a job. Because it's much easier to sell at a fee that's meaningful when your whole sense of being and life and mortgage doesn't rest on it. So, but you can manufacture that a little bit. So that's another one. And then the last one, I think I said the last one about 5 minutes ago, didn't I? The aim is to get to the aim for me became to get to the place where it really, these enrollment conversations really genuinely are about, is this the right time for this person to do this work with me? And if the answer is yes, that will include the fact that my work, like I've got a new client this afternoon who's going to do a 3-month engagement with me that costs $2,500. It's like, that is, that's a part of that, I guess. But also that for them to know that, that's where the gifting, the coaching experience comes in. The only way we know that is if we've done some really powerful coaching together. So it's another version of what you said, Susan. It's like, not only will being a successful leader be worth, in this case, $2,500, $10,000, or $2,000, or $1,000, or whatever it is, but getting that thing that I've just had in those that conversation last week and that conversation today, that over 3 months is worth this. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a lot. What does that give you some things? And what did you notice?
And I think that the bit that I took a while to grasp, but have now, is that thing of, if you're setting a price, a value on this experience they're going to have, they have to be able to look at you and think, I want to be like that. What she's got, what she can do represents $2,000, or, it's belief that it's not just the money on the table, but that person can deliver for that price. They have to be able to look at you. And as you say, that conversation that you've had with them has to really be so powerful that they will believe you can deliver against that price that you've put on the table.
Yeah, and if we think about making ourselves client prone, then like a thing that makes it easier or more like for the client to say yes is to have an embodied experience of that. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to get too conceptual. Like it is a bit for the woman today. It's like, it's quite a lot of money. I mean, I don't know, for some of you it might not be. For me, it feels quite a lot of money to sit and talk to someone for an hour a week or 3 times a month for 3 months, $2,500. But it doesn't feel like a lot by the time we're talking about creating the foundations for the rest of this woman's life, right? That's a really different thing. And when she's felt what that could be like.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's particularly true if you're coaching people around things like confidence and self-belief and all these sorts of things. They had to be able to look at the coach and say, wow, she is an embodiment, as you call it, it's a good word for it, of what I want to get. So I believe that person can help me. They can sit alongside me and help me with my, if you sit there looking all shy and retiring and a bit embarrassed about talking about money, why would somebody believe that you can coach them around confidence?
Yeah, so I'd say there's a distinction that I would make that there is some leadership around the process. So if we think about the propose bit of that, one of the ways to the way to get better, a way that's important to be good at that, if you want to make that more successful, is to have some leadership in that. That's the thing you're saying. It's not shying away from saying it. I still feel a bit weird saying it, I got to saying the fee, but not shying away from that, getting embarrassed about that, not saying it. If you don't say it, then that flywheel breaks. That is a problem. I don't think so much. Personally, it's about in the rest of the conversation, in the coaching, in the person understanding the value, that it's about them seeing me and thinking I'm what I don't know if this is what you said, but it sounded a bit like you're saying I'm what they want to be like. I think it might be that they are saying I'm, based on that experience, I'm what they want to have in their corner, or it might be them saying I want to feel like I've felt in those conversations on a regular basis. Now, I think what's interesting about coaches, and I'm definitely an example of this, coaches sometimes do look impressive from the outside. Often, so I've done a lot of stuff. I've got 2 books, I've got a podcast, I've written 250 blogs, right? So there is a sense people might look at that and say, I want to be like that. But the reason I've written that stuff is another thing that will oil the flywheel, is that I've been coached a lot. And so if you get coached a lot, like if I'm sitting there 6 years ago going, Joel, I'm anxious about posting blogs online. Like if I wasn't getting coached at that point, I don't do that thing. And I don't create that practice, and the practice doesn't last 6 years, and I don't have the books, and I feel like a different person. So it's like that there is sometimes a thing where coaches look impressive from the outside. But I think Katie being a great example, incredibly impressive woman, wonderful presence, kind of almost invisible, gentle hug of a coach, and yet invisible, completely invisible online. And I don't think anyone would know enough about her unless they've listened to my podcast interview with her to say, I want to be like this woman, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe that wasn't the right wording for me. I didn't mean that they would emulate you, but that they would look to you as somebody who can, as you said, be in their corner and can enable them to get where they want to be. They have to have belief in you as a coach.
And I really think one of the ways you can create that is by creating coaching experience with them. Yeah, thanks, Susan. Jamie, where was it Xenia next?
Thanks so much, Robbie. A quick question for you. So I found myself unintentionally falling into what you've just described, which is meeting somebody for the first time, being introduced to somebody as a coach and finding myself coaching them for the first hour. The thing that I then struggle with is to retrospectively, effectively, in the second or the third hour, hopefully second hour, to then do a discovery. So I kind of, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I find myself having invested what could end up with 3 hours before I've actually earned anything, which is fine if I don't need to earn and is not fine if I do. So I didn't know whether you had any helpful advice on kind of not so much the first stage of actually providing a coaching experience, but how then to transition from that back to discovery and into a coaching process.
Yeah. And like I said, like the woman today is a good example. I don't think there's a problem with coaching someone for 3 hours at all. There's plenty of good reasons to do that, but not if you don't want to be doing it and it feels like your boundaries, you've crossed your boundaries somehow. Like that's one of basically the kind of thing that I feel like I've learned about what you've just said is holding the boundaries and what we might also call the contracting in a way that fits with my integrity. So let me just check if I've got it though, because there's kind of, or maybe I can do both. For me, there's two parts of it. There's how are you setting up these conversations? And then there's the move at the end of the conversation to get out of the coaching session and into the conversation about the proposal and money. Is it both of those or one of those that's particularly interesting?
Why don't you cover both? Because I think they're both interesting challenges, shall we say?
Yeah, nice. So I'll try and do them at a reasonably high level. Have we got more questions, by the way? Is anyone else like dying to get their hand up? Because otherwise I can give it a bit more space. Okay, I'll give it a bit more space, but put your hand up as soon as if you've got another question and we can move to that. So being really clear that for the first one, for the gifted coaching experience, being really clear at the point of that happening, that it is what is happening is essentially the thing. So it is like a really clear contracting piece. The example would be someone contacts me, they're a referral or whatever. The thing I'll say is the way I work is I'll gift you a coaching session as part of finding out if we'll work well together. And there's obviously more language around that and a bit more that I say, but it's like, there it is. That's what we're doing. We're going to do this coaching and we're going to do it for the purposes of us working together. Now, there might be a different one. Like I'd sometimes just invite people into coaching conversations because it feels like an interesting thing to do and they're not interested in working with me necessarily. And then the contracting would be a bit different. But presuming that there's some interest in working together, it's like name it at the start. And if you've like just met someone somewhere, if you're kind of in the connect bit of the flywheel, but you've ended up coaching someone, which has happened to definitely me, probably a few people on this call, because especially as you're learning coaching, just using it everywhere when I was training, unable to switch it off, don't want to. But even now, it's like, the reason I'm a coach is because I've always listened a lot to people. So you find yourself, you've had a 45-minute conversation with somebody, you've basically coached them. I think it's a fairly direct move. It's like, wow, it feels like we've had a really important conversation here. One of the things I sometimes do to people is gift them a full coaching session. Would you, it'd be a bit like this, but with a bit more structure around it. Would you like to do that? And then again, we know we're in a coaching session and they know that. And then in that coaching session, again, it depends a little bit on the setup of it. The key move I learned from a woman called Giovanna Capozza, who has worked with Rich but also is an amazing coach in her own right, and a really interesting woman. She built an incredibly successful, I think, alternative health business, essentially using it. She was a bit like Katie, found the Prosperous Coach book and then realized it was describing exactly how she'd built another business in another industry. So if the person knows that the conversation is about potentially becoming a client, then it's name that at the start. And here's how I do it. I say, we're here to discover if, like I was saying to Susan, if we're the right people, if it's right for the two of us to work together now. That's the purpose of this conversation. There's a few things that might happen at the end. One, we might actually find out that coaching isn't what you need right now. Maybe you need one session, or maybe we didn't know what coaching was and now we do, and you can go off and you don't need any coaching, and that's perfect. And often that happens because I'll have another resource, or you'll come up with another resource that will be better suited to helping you right now than coaching. So that might happen. Another is that I might make a referral because I might not be the right coach for you. And if that's the case, again, coaching's good, but it's not me. I might be able to make a referral. You might know somebody else. Another is we might both think that doing some coaching together is the right thing to do, in which case we can talk about that. And the last one is we might not know the answer to that by the end of this call. And so we might arrange another call. And then in my case, we're getting into the 3-hour territory then. And then I'm going to manage that a bit more carefully because depending on who it is, I don't want this to go on forever. And then the key moment is you've got to finish the coaching bit, in my view, like 30 minutes before the end of the call. And that's why sometimes I end up in a second conversation, because you've got to leave space then to have the conversation about money. And usually at that point for me, the wrap up of the coaching session bit involves, we get to a conclusion and there's some useful takeaway. Often I'll ask that question. It's like a great closing question for a coaching session. I think it's like, what's been most useful about this for you, or what stands out from this session for you? And then you're in a nice place, because if they say something, you can say, well, I'm really glad it's been useful for you. And then if it's true, you can say, I think we've done some really good work together over this conversation or conversations. So I think we're at that place now where we might want to talk about working together. Where are you? What's your feeling about that? And if hopefully they say, yeah, I'd love to hear about that. I think mostly people do, because if they've really had a good experience with you, they say that. Then you've made that slightly awkward bridge into now we can talk about what it looks like to work with me and all that kind of thing. Does that answer the question, Xenia, or what are you taking away from that, or what's left?
No, I think I actually think that's extraordinarily helpful advice. And I think, again, just kind of my personal experience is I probably let myself or let us fall into coaching sessions without being explicit about that. And actually, if I were more explicit about that at the beginning, then it would be, and equally more explicit at the end, saying, okay, we've had that discussion. Now let's get into the next discussion. And perhaps a bit like Susan, I'm going to use my Britishness to excuse the discomfort of actually being explicit about these things. But maybe that's what I'm hearing is that's what's required. And I think that would be a great takeaway for me. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to say, it will feel awkward. Like when you practice doing new things, it feels awkward. I used to have it like scripted out basically on my notepad. And now I don't, because I've said it hundreds of times, all that stuff. But you have to kind of, it is about practice. And the thing, the Prosperous Coach lesson, I guess, about this is it is about service. Like the best way in the long run for someone to work with us is mostly for them to pay us. Because then we keep doing the work. Their commitment changes. Like you can't work, you might be able to work with one or two people. I might be able to work with one or two, I don't speak for you. I might be able to work with one or two people for free if I chose to. I could do that. I couldn't work with everyone for free. It wouldn't be sustainable. It wouldn't work. And so in the end, it's absolutely vital that the flywheel works and the business ecosystem works for the clients, for you. And it is a different thing. When the prices go up, coaching is different, and mostly in a good way, when people are really skin in the game.
Heike, next question.
I'm just curious, Robbie, whether you have a price range, or how do you actually decide what you are going to charge a party?
Yeah, such a good question. You make it up, basically, every time. It's always made up, right? A big, important moment for me was realizing that pricing is all made up. And money is basically made up, right? It's like, it's not even based on gold anymore. It's just numbers, which we attach like great, very significance of my sense of self and livelihood to. So on one level, it's made up, and it's kind of important to remember that. At different times, I've done different things. Part of it was how do I get this business to a place where where I can do it, where it works? Like, that was a part of it. The prices have to go up to get to that point. Part of it's always been about confidence and about how do I, what's the most I can feel like I can say. Sometimes it's been playfulness. It's like, I want to learn about this, so I'm going to say the words £10,000 because it feels like a truly ridiculous thing to say. And sometimes it's been that. And in terms of how I think about it now, like, I've got to feel I can't be feeling drained by the price that I'm charging. I can't be feeling undervalued. That's really important to me, because it's really important to me in my work that I'm energized by it. That's one of the reasons I changed my career. I wanted some work that all of it left me with more energy, if possible. And of course, that's not. I haven't yet mastered that. I don't know if anyone has. So that's one part of it. Another part of the way I think about it is still about what makes it add up. So it's like, if I was to design my ideal life, my ideal week, how many coaching clients have I got, and how does that add up? And it was a great moment when I realized that I actually had the price already. I was getting stressed about not having raised my prices, and I realized that actually, if I had a full practice at the price I had already, I would have more than enough money for me. And that's a wonderful moment to realize that we don't have to keep raising our prices. And then the way I price, I do have a range, but my aim is to have a coherent pricing across the engagements that I offer. So at the moment, the last ones I sold, I mostly sell. I used to just do 6 and 12 months in my private business. I now have this 3-month one that I invented during COVID, and because we were having a baby and I couldn't fit any 6-month engagements in before the baby arrived. So I was like, what can I do? I could make up a new way of working and just do like a 3-month thing that'll fit in before paternity leave. So I now have that, and I love that one now. And actually, I sell it a bit too much, because, of course, the problem with having a 3-month one is that it's cheaper than the 6-month one, and so everybody buys it. So, like, really important lesson is only tell the client about the engagement that you actually think they should do and that you actually want to do with them. Because if you tell them about that and you tell them about the one that's 3 times cheaper, they'll probably choose the cheaper one. For a while, a 12-month engagement was basically just a pricing anchor, which made everyone buy my 4-month engagement that I had at the time. So everyone was like, yeah, I'd love to do this 12-month one. Then they came back and were like, I changed my mind. I'm going to do 4 months. But so I have 3, 6, and 12. I choose what I propose based on what I genuinely think is the right thing for the person that I'm sitting opposite. And they're like, not quite pro rata. I decided to have, you don't have to do this, you can do what you like, but I decided that like 12 months should be a bit cheaper than 4 times 3 months. And 6 months should be a bit cheaper than 2 times 3. 6 should be a bit cheaper than 2 times 3. But then it's not as simple as that, and it never is, because you don't quite get the same from me. Like, the structure is different. It's more, my engagements are more structured when it's 3 months than when it's 6, and more flexible when it's 6. Like, you don't get the same amount. It's a kind of arbitrary thing. And I guess there's a thing that I'm saying in here, which I haven't said explicitly. It was a big deal for me to shift from charging for a certain number of sessions to charging by a certain number of months. And given we've talked quite a lot about money, that actually made it a lot easier for me to raise the prices, because somehow to me saying, I can't do the sums on 6 months. I don't actually know how many coaching sessions I do, but say it's 20. Saying 20 sessions costs you $4,500 or whatever. feels a lot more expensive than saying 6 months of coaching with me. Me being a coach for 6 months costs $4,500, feels really different. So that was a big deal for me, making that shift.
Robbie, thank you so much for your time today. We'll close there, but just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences with the group. It means a great deal to me. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks all for being here and for your questions. And just to say, be in touch with me if I can help with anything. Like I'm everywhere these days, really. But thecoachesjourney.com is loads of resources for coaches, including some videos of me. They're quite old now, but a lot of my thinking hasn't changed that much. robbieswale.com. Find me on LinkedIn. All those things. Coaching really matters to me, as you can probably tell. And so if there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye all.
Hello, Robbie here again. A couple of quick things before you go on to whatever else you've got going on in the rest of your day. And that is, if you've enjoyed this conversation, then you might be interested in becoming a supporter of the Coach's Journey podcast or joining the Coach's Journey community. Both of those are ways to support the show, help it continue, help it reach more and more people, but they also give you other things that you might be interested in. If you become a supporter, which is paying a small amount of money every month, then you'll get advance notice of guests, perhaps the chance to ask questions of guests, depending on what membership level you have, and more monthly video updates from me, all kinds of other bits and pieces. And if you join the Coach's Journey community, then you get all of that, plus you get to be part of a group coaching program led by me, and attend group coaching calls up to 10 times a year, have one-on-one coaching with me, and be part of a community of coaches who want to create thriving coaching businesses and thrive as people while they do it. And one of the members said recently that the word that keeps coming up in the members' WhatsApp group is beautiful to describe those calls. And so I'd love to have you there on one of those calls. And as a member of the community or a supporter of the show, it'd mean the world to me, and it'll help me to keep doing this thing that I love to do and that many, many people have told me is really helpful for them. So thanks very much for listening, and hope to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.